I told you I wanted to speak to you about the border, and I think it's very important we do so. It's middle of March. We got a midterm election coming up. And here's one thing that any smart Democrat strategist knows. The border is a disaster for the libs because the American people, they don't care that it's lawless, that there's an ongoing intentional evasion of our federal laws going on that is enriching the cartels, that is allowing for the infusion of opioids into the country that kill over 100,000 people a year as of last year. I mean, mostly opioids. There's some other drugs in there, too. It's about 70% of the overdoses are opioid related. All of this is happening at our southern border, and what the Democrats quietly know, and it's why you won't see coverage of this, you won't see analysis of this, is that the American people are not with them on this. A solid majority of the American people, 55, 60, maybe even 65%, recognize illegal immigration as a problem, something they'll want to see less of, and understand that our border is a mess of lawlessness and dysfunction and violations of sovereignty, which is why this story struck me as particularly interesting. The Biden team, this is the Washington Examiner just yesterday, the Biden team fears a mass migration event from axing Trump pandemic expulsion rule. Now, this might sound like, well, hold on, what's the Trump rule? Which one? Remain in Mexico? Oh, no, this is Title 42. This is the CDC authority, which is terrifying. Now, whenever someone says CDC authority, I say, I don't think they should have that. I think we've all learned the CDC is a politicized mess, and it's Fauci and Walensky's little fiefdom, and is unaccountable, and is also just a massive failure. Didn't make things better over the course of the pandemic, didn't actually protect us in any meaningful way from the virus with the policies. In fact, they made it worse. Think about that. The CDC, I would argue, made the pandemic worse. For a federal agency that really exists for this moment, more than any other time in its history, I think that is more than enough justification to take a long, hard look at its funding and to do a massive house cleaning when Republicans come in, essentially fire all the senior bureaucrats who were otherwise, what's the point? Why do they get to make so many wrong decisions? But we'll come to the CDC and COVID lockdown side of the discussion in a few moments. Going back to the border, Title 42 allows Border Patrol to turn away people because we're in the midst of a pandemic. And if they let that expire, now we're back to where we were before entirely, where people just game the immigration system. And here, the primary way that it has been gamed under the Biden administration is family units show up. And even with Title 42 authority, the family units, because Mexico and along some parts of the border was not taking them back, they were being allowed into the U.S. and then claiming asylum. And so there has been this one way, if you showed up as an adult single male at the border and were apprehended, there are tens of thousands of gotaways on a monthly basis, too, people that just drive or sprint into the U.S. But if you were caught violating U.S. federal law, entering the United States without permission, and you were a single adult male, you could, and in many cases were, turned away, put back on the other side, the Mexican side of the border, because of Title 42. What happens if the Biden administration gets rid of this? Well, they worry that there will be, quote, Department of Homeland Security intelligence indicates 25,000 migrants waiting just south of the U.S.-Mexico border could rush to get across in April when the Biden administration is set to meet with Mexico about stopping expulsions under what is called Title 42. Such a surge would only add to the existing border crisis. This is all in the Washington Examiner piece. An average of 5,000 to 7,000 non-citizens have been encountered attempting to cross illegally each day over the past year, far beyond the 1,000 that the Obama administration said would constitute a crisis. The border right now, in terms of lawlessness, violations of U.S. sovereignty, importation of illegal drugs, and human trafficking, and the cartels making money and having influence on the Mexican side of the border, on both sides of the border, really, it is worse than it has ever been. Think about this. The Biden administration is remarkable in achieving records, record inflation, record illegal crossings at the border, right? Record price of gas. Go down the list. They're number one in so many bad ways. And on the border, we're going to have to be getting the word out about this because the Democrat media is not going to touch this, obviously. They know that when it comes to winning primaries, Democrats play the open borders amnesty game all day long. But when it comes to a national level election in the close races, they know that in purple states, important Senate races, important House races that could go either way, amnesty is generally and open borders policies are generally a loser for them. So they want to have it both ways. They want to, and this is a constant with the Democrats, pretend to represent something other than that which they do. They want to do a head fake. Oh, no, we want border security too, man. We're all about it. No problem. Yeah, we want to have a big reform of immigration, you see. We're going to really secure that border. Maybe we'll do some kind of a phased for the dreamers pathway thing. They always start muttering about it. No, your amnesty, your illegal aliens being allowed to stay in the country forever illegally is amnesty. They can call it whatever they want. We don't have to use their terms to concede the debate before it's even happened. So this is what we're facing right now. The Biden administration knows if they drop this Title 42 authority, they may have 25,000 people. It'll be something of a replay of the, 15 to 20,000 Haitian migrants who all camped out at the border in an effort to try to come into America, in an effort to try to evade the normal immigration process, skip to the front of the line, break our laws, and be rewarded for it. Now, I know a lot of you say, oh, Buck, well, what about we should have, first of all, the Democrats are never going to send the military to the border, as you know. Fair point. Worth at least pointing out that they don't want the National Guard to be there. They don't want this to happen. But I think it's also important for everyone to know that the problem at our border would not actually be solved by, even if we had the big, beautiful wall that Trump had promised, and I mean from coast to coast, wouldn't solve the problem. Even if we had National Guard deployed, all along the border to help out with border security, it would help. Don't misunderstand me. This would help. It would not solve, because here's the fundamental challenge we face. We still have a wide open door through the asylum system, and people abuse it. And they come into this country where there's no interior enforcement. They are surrendering themselves. Illegal immigrants cross into the country, which that act itself is illegal. I mean, the physical act of walking onto U.S. soil, not at a port of entry, that's illegal. They walk in, they wait. I've seen this. So I'm not like I read about this. I've seen this dozens and dozens of times as it happens. They wave down Border Patrol. So even if you had National Guard down there, they would just wave down the National Guard and say, hey, I'm here. I want my asylum. Now bring me water and a sandwich and get me medical care. That's what actually happens. So it wouldn't solve the problem. It would help. To solve the problem, we need a change in the political will to enforce the immigration laws that we actually have, which means interior enforcement. It means people that come into the country illegally who do not have a legitimate asylum claim are turned away, are found when they don't show up for their hearing, or found when sometimes they show up for their hearing for asylum, are denied. And then there's another hearing, believe it or not, that is their deportation hearing. So they can choose not to show up for that one. There are multiple steps in the process. Do you think the Biden administration is enforcing any of this? Of course not. Of course not. Because they like the flood of illegals into the country, because they view them as primarily, not entirely, but primarily future Democrat voters. And also it makes all the libs who live in major cities and are obsessed still with CNN and the New York Times, etc., makes them feel good about themselves, because they send their kids to private schools. They don't worry about the burdening of the public school system. They don't worry about the costs of all the, whether it's English as a second language instruction or what it does to hospital emergency rooms, all these things that have been discussions that Democrats used to agree with Republicans on in the past about illegal immigration. That doesn't bother them. They think it's fantastic. And the fact that it suppresses wages for workers, which is true, by the way, another supply and demand situation that Democrats deny. It doesn't affect the whole country at once, obviously. You can't see illegal immigration affecting wages nationwide in any industry. When you do it county by county along the border, when you do it in places where there's been a large influx of illegal immigrant arrivals, you do in fact see, and there's analysis from professors even at Harvard University that will show you that there is an effect on wages. They do not want a secure border. The Democrats do not want this to stop. And we have to remind the American people that this is a question of politics and political will now. It's not just about this. It's not just about offense. It's not just about additional resources. It's how do you enforce the immigration laws at our border? Do you have Remain in Mexico in place? You know what they've been doing with that, by the way? Slow rolling it. They put like a few dozen people in the Remain in Mexico program, but they say they're doing it so that there's a talking point, and then they know that if they really did it, they would just be admitting that Trump was right, so they won't really. So the DHS under Biden is lying to you, effectively. They're lying to you. They don't want Remain in Mexico. They don't want a secure border, and they don't want the flow of illegals to stop. And we may see 25,000 of them all at once try to come into the country in one place, overwhelm the system. And you know what you'll have? Democrats come up with some narrative of, oh, but Border Patrol was so mean. Remember the horse whipping story with the Haitian migrants? A total lie. Did a single journalist who went with that, who propagated that lie at the time, feel badly about it afterwards? Of course not. The whole point was to create a narrative of the good guys, so to speak, are the ones that want illegal immigration into the country. They're the nice people. The bad people are the ones that want to enforce our immigration laws. We're the only country in the world, for some reason, that is not allowed to have immigration laws. It is racist for America to prevent some people from coming into the country illegally. That is the actual position of the left. Every other country can do whatever they want. That's fine. They have sovereignty. We're not allowed to have sovereignty.